This video will go over elements of a complete sentence, Unit 1. So, the very beginning of this unit reviews independent versus dependent clauses. And it's really important that you are able to quickly identify what is an independent clause versus a dependent clause. Okay, so an independent clause contains a subject and a verb and is a complete thought, meaning it can stand alone. So when we just have an independent clause by itself, one IC, it looks something like this. Steve excels in the classroom. Who or what is this sentence about? It's about Steve. Okay. Steve is our noun, or excuse me, our subject of the sentence. Okay. What does Steve do? He excels. Okay. And so there is our verb. Okay, so subject plus verb equals independent clause. Who or what is this sentence about, and what are they doing? Okay, an independent clause can be part of a sentence. So, because he studies regularly, Steve excels in the classroom. Okay, so notice that this independent clause is preceded by a dependent clause. How do I know that this is a dependent clause? Because it contains a subordinating conjunction. The word because says, ding, 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 I'm a subordinating conjunction. I can't stand on my own. If we were to walk up to someone and say, because he studies regularly, and stop talking, the person that we were talking to would say, because he studies regularly, what? What do we know about that? Well, we know that Steve excels in the classroom. We have a subject and a verb in this clause, but because we have the word because, a subordinating conjunction, that creates an independent clause. So essentially right here we have BC, comma, IC. What kind of sentence do we have right there? A complex sentence. Okay, DCIC. Could we revert this? Absolutely. We could revert this and have ICDC, and we'll talk about that a little bit more specifically here in a second. Okay. We can also create compound sentences by joining more than one independent clause together. And there are several different ways to do that. One way is with a coordinating conjunction, or a CC, okay, a fanboy, F or for and nor but or yet so. That's the way conjunctions go. Okay. Steve is not a great athlete. Steve is our subject. Is not a great athlete is our verb phrase. Okay. Is not. Okay. Is our verb. So first IC, comma, coordinating conjunction, but he excels in the classroom. Notice that this second IC, this second independent clause, has a subject and a verb. He excels, right? We could get rid of this whole part of the sentence. He excels in the classroom. Who or what is this sentence about? He. And what does he do? He excels. That's an independent clause. One of the things I notice students doing is they often forget this second subject. They delete this. They still have a comma. That's not correct, because then we're missing a subject. We have to have a subject and a verb with our comma and our coordinating conjunction. Okay? A dependent clause, a quick review of dependent clauses. A dependent clause contains a subject and a verb, but does not express a complete thought, meaning it cannot stand on its own. It must be part of a sentence. So take a look. Because he studies regularly, Steve excels in the classroom. We know that this is a dependent clause, okay, because it has the word because in it, meaning it's a subordinating conjunction. Ding, ding, ding. I can't stand on my own. I need an independent clause in order to create a complete thought. So, two ways that we can use DCs. We can have DC, comma, IC, okay, or we can invert that structure and we can have IC, DC. Okay. So Steve excels in the classroom because he studies regularly. When we end a sentence with a dependent clause, we don't need a comma. But when we begin a sentence with a dependent clause, we do need a comma. Okay, so let's review some subordinating conjunctions. If you can memorize this quick little acronym, these are some basic subordinating conjunctions that will help you create dependent clauses. Okay, after, although, as, when, whenever, while, until, unless, because, before, if, or since. So here's a basic sentence. I studied for the test. Who or what is this sentence about? I. What did I do? Studied. Subject, verb. Independent clause. We just have a basic IC right there. Okay. Then we can add a dependent clause, which, if it's standing on its own, means it's a fragment, and we want to avoid fragments. Something like, although I studied for the test. So we have our subordinating conjunction, although. We have I studied, right? Who or what is this about? I. What did I do? Studied. Okay. But this although creates a dependent clause or a fragment when it stands on its own. Okay. So we want to make sure that our dependent clauses always are connected to an independent clause. So take a look at the correct construction. Although I studied for the test, comma, I still did poorly. So we have DC, comma, IC. If we were to invert that sentence, I still did poorly, although I studied for the test, right? We would not need that comma if the dependent clause came after the independent clause. Okay. So that should be a quick review for you. This might be some new information for you, okay? And these are phrases. So we just talked about clauses, but now we're going to talk about phrases. And phrases are a little bit different than clauses. Okay, let's take a look at the definition. A phrase is a group of words that does not contain a subject or a verb. It might have one, but it does not have the other. It cannot stand alone as a sentence. Okay. And we are going to focus on three types of phrases in this course. Okay. We're going to focus on participial, absolute, and appositive phrases. Okay. And generally, we're going to use commas when we use these types of phrases. Okay. So let's look more specifically at participial phrases. Okay. Participial phrases consist of a verb that then ends in en, ed, or ing. And what it does is it takes that verb and creates an adjective. Okay. So it takes a verb and turns it into, let's do verb plus en, or excuse me, en, ed, ing. Thus creating an adjective. Okay. So let's take a look at the examples and then it'll make a little bit more sense. Okay. Shaken and disturbed. So we took the verb shake and we added en. We took the verb disturb and added ed. Okay. Now, what these adjectives do is they modify or essentially give us more information. When I think about modify, I think about more, modified more, modified more. We get more information about a word or words in the sentence. So shaken and disturbed, Aaron turned off the television. Okay. We get more information about this word Aaron. Okay. What do we find out about him? He was shaken and disturbed. Okay. When we use a participial phrase, these adjectives that we've created always need to be next to the noun that they are modifying. Okay. What's another way that we could write this sentence? Let me show you another way. I'm just going to copy this. Copy. I'm going to show you another way we could write this sentence. Okay. Aaron, comma. Okay. Aaron, shaken and disturbed, turned off the television. We can essentially have, we can have our, guys, this is really hard when I'm trying to make a video to highlight. We can have the participial phrase after the noun that it's modified. But notice how I'm offsetting this with commas, okay? Our phrases are offset with commas, okay? Aaron, shaken and disturbed, turned off the television. Or shaken and disturbed, Aaron turned off the television, okay? We always want that participial phrase next to the noun that it is modifying, either before or after, okay? Let's take a look at absolute phrases, okay? Absolute phrases may contain a subject, but there is no verb, okay? No verb. And this is where you kind of have to think a little bit more, okay? These types of phrases modify, remember, modify means more, the whole sentence, not just the noun, okay? So in a participial phrase, we're getting information just about the noun, but in an absolute phrase, we're getting information about the sentence as a whole. So take a look at the example. Aaron stared down at the floor, comma, his hands shaking and his heart racing. Okay. Notice how we have nouns, excuse me, or subjects, but no verbs. Okay. So his hand shaking and his heart racing essentially modifies or gives us more information about this sentence as a whole. Okay. Notice how it's offset with a comma. Okay. So we could invert this sentence and we could have his hand shaking and his heart racing, comma, Aaron stared down at the floor. We could invert that. But again, an absolute phrase has a subject but no acting verb, okay? And it modifies the sentence as a whole. Okay. Appositive phrases. Appositive phrases are generally very easy to identify because they restate, redefine, or rename a noun that is in the sentence. Essentially, we're going to get more information about a noun. It's going to tell us which specific person, place, or thing that we're referring to. So it should always be placed next to the noun that it's modifying, or we are getting more information about. So, Mr. Stevens, my psychology teacher, is an interesting man. Okay. So we get this extra information about Mr. Stevens. We find out that he's my psychology teacher. This is redefining who this person is. Mr. Stevens, my psychology teacher, is an interesting man. It's redefining, giving us a definition, okay, of who Mr. Stevens is. And I want you to notice that it is offset with commas, okay? We could also write this sentence, let me show you, so that it looked like this. Stevens. Okay, my psychology teacher, Mr. Stevens, is an interesting man. Again, it's right next to the noun that it is modifying, okay, either before or after. Okay. All right. So let's come down here and let's take a look at numbers 1 through 8 on page 2. Number 1 through 8. And this is we're going to do a few together and then you're going to do the rest in your packet. Okay. So numbers 1 through 8 on page 2, it says identify the bold-faced portion as either an independent clause, a dependent clause, or a phrase. So let's take a look. Until his mother arrived. Okay. I have a subject, his mother. What did she do? She arrived. So who is this sentence about? His mother arrived. We have a subject and a verb, but until. Until is one of those subordinating conjunctions. It says ding, ding, ding. I'm a dependent clause. Okay. Hoping that his mother would arrive soon, Steve paced impatiently. Okay. So I ask myself, do I see a subordinating conjunction? No, I don't see a word like since, as, because, until, when. In fact, this sentence starts with the word hoping. Hope is a verb, okay, but ing has been added to this. So I definitely have a phrase, right? I definitely have a phrase because I don't have a subject and a verb. Okay. All I have is this group of words. So this is a phrase. More specifically, if we were to be identifying what kind of phrase, this is an absolute phrase because it's modifying the entire sentence. Okay. Oops. All right, let's take a look at number 3. The students worked on their tests. Okay, who or what is this sentence about? The students. What did they do? Worked. The students worked on their tests. Subject and verb, it can stand all on its own. We have an independent clause. Okay, let's take a look at one more together. Okay, Steve, pacing impatiently, hoped that his mother would arrive soon. Okay, so notice that I don't have a subject and a verb. I have pacing impatiently. Pace is a verb. Its ing has been added to it. Okay, so I have to ask myself, is this a dependent clause or an independent clause or a phrase? This is definitely a phrase. So I'm going to put a P right next to it. But let's just ask ourselves, what kind of phrase do we have right there? Steve, pacing impatiently. I get extra information about a subject, and essentially what I have is a verb with an ing ending. I have a participial phrase. Okay, so in class, we're going to complete numbers 5, 6, 7, and 8, but that gives you a good idea of numbers 1 through 4. Okay, now let's take a look at the second part of this week's lesson. This goes over sentence fragments. Okay, a sentence fragment is a group of words that is not a complete sentence. Sometimes writers will use sentence fragments in a piece of literature. Sometimes writers will use fragments intentionally, folks, but we want to avoid them as much as possible in our formal academic writing. Okay, so what are some common causes of sentence fragments? Okay, so the first common cause is it's missing either a subject or a verb. The guard near the entrance. Well, I have a subject, the guard, person, place, or thing, but I have no idea what that guard is doing. So this is missing a verb. Okay. Changed into new clothes. Well, changed is a verb, but I don't know who changed into new clothes. So it's missing either a subject or a verb. Okay. Sometimes we accidentally leave a dependent clause. Dependent clauses always start with subordinating conjunctions, and here's that acronym again. Sometimes we accidentally leave them alone. So, for example, because I really enjoy football. Because I really enjoy football, what? We are missing that independent clause that is able to stand on its own. Because I really enjoy football, I'm going to purchase Lions season tickets. Okay, so I am going. That's our subject and our verb, our independent clause. We have our dependent clause preceding it. Sometimes we accidentally leave a phrase alone. Okay, so stranded in the middle of a darkening forest. We don't know who or what was happening, right? Laura desperately searched for civilization. And so this is when it's really important, folks, to be able to identify those phrases so that you can make sure that your phrases do have deep independent clauses that create complete sentences. Okay. Hoping that his mother would arrive soon. Who was hoping and what were they doing? Steve fiddled and paced impatiently. Mark slipped away. Okay, there's a subject or a complete sentence. But then we have the phrase leaving his empty cereal bowl on the table. Okay, leaving his empty cereal bowl, right? What kind of phrase is that? It happens to be an absolute phrase that's left on its own. It needs an independent clause. Mark slipped away, comma, leaving his empty cereal bowl on the table. All right. So generally speaking, one last little note is we want to avoid beginning a sentence with these types of words. Okay. And, which, but, or, such as, unless we're doing it intentionally. But oftentimes when we begin a sentence with one of these words, we inadvertently or accidentally create fragments. So take a look at this fragment. If we were to just have this phrase, which impressed her mother greatly, we don't know who or what impressed her mother greatly. We need an independent clause. Steve graciously stopped and waited for Leanne, which impressed her mother greatly. Okay. So again, avoiding sentences beginning with words like and, which, but, or, such as. Okay, let's take a look at one more example. Take a look at this phrase, such as crime, a crumbling infrastructure, home foreclosures, and poor public services. Starting this sentence this way creates a fragment because we don't know what we're talking about here. We need an independent clause, such as many problems infest our cities, such as crime, a crumbling infrastructure, home foreclosures, and public services. So, subject, problems, infest is the verb, and then we get that nice list with that phrase. Okay, so let's take a look at numbers 9 through 12. Okay, 9 through 12. So again, we're identifying if it's a subject or a fragment based on these bolded parts of the sentence. Okay, so his sparkling new Nikes squeaking with each cut. Do I have a subject or even a verb in this sentence? No, this is a fragment. Okay, we don't have a subject or a verb. We don't know who or what was happening in this sentence. Okay, so take a look at now. Joe dribbled up the court. Subject Joe, verb dribbled, comma, his sparkling new Nikes squeaking with each cut. There's my sentence. Okay, with an absolute phrase. So there's our I see, comma, phrase, right? I see, comma, phrase, that absolute phrase. Okay, let's take it look at one more together. While I wiped the windows. So I have while, which is a subordinating conjunction, I is a subject, and wiped is a verb. But I know, as an astute student, that the word while automatically makes a dependent clause. Dependent clauses, when left alone, are fragments. Okay, and we'll work on numbers 12 through 14 together. Okay, so this video reviews elements of a complete sentence. Make sure that you understand these. You're able to identify independent clauses, dependent clauses, the different types of phrases, and then when we have fragments versus sentences. Thank you for watching.